Insomniacs, and welcome to Ruling Class Crisis 5, The Elephant in the Room. Excuse me. For those of you who's been following my series here, and by the way, welcome to a number of new subscribers. There seems to have been a bit of a jump in it. Thank you. Whoever you are, bless your heart. Now, as I said, I have been developing this thesis over the past 2 years. Please be gentle with it. As a theory, it's just a baby, but I believe it explains an awful lot of the craziness around us, including, among other things, the absurdly improbable fact of the election of Donald Trump. Now, I gave this talk last month in Denver for Liberty on the Rocks, and it will be available as a video at their site, but I've been told that it's going to take a while to get it edited and actually set up. So I'm going to sum up the theory, what I've been talking about for a while, for those of you who just joined it, and I'm going to conclude with the elephant in the room. Now, what I have been postulating is that a great deal of the craziness we see around us can be attributed to what I call a ruling class crisis. And by that I mean there's a widespread realization, and maybe an inchoate feeling, that what we have is a ruling class which is not fit to rule. Now, to go over the major points, hi puppy, excuse me, I have a dog here. To go over the major points here is that, do we have a ruling class? Yes, of course we have a ruling class, because every complex society has a ruling class. So the functions of a ruling class are have been historically arms, land, and knowledge. That is to say, arms, which was originally the mastery of the dominant weapons platform, later became the obligation in times of war to lead troops. Land, today read production, since the most important parts of production are no longer purely agricultural. And then knowledge, which was originally things like the knowledge, originally probably the first knowledge of any consequence to civilization was astronomy. The turn of the seasons, when it's time to plant, harvest. Later, things like geometry, measuring out fields, designing large water control projects. All pristine civilizations that we know of begin with large, extensive water control projects. Now, I further postulated that a ruling class can maintain itself and the social stability which it fosters if it fulfills these three functions of a ruling class, if its members love or at least identify their self-interest with the country as a whole. And here's a point, stick a pin in it. They are open enough that the rising ambitious classes find it easier to try to join the ruling class than they do to overthrow it. Okay, now, I believe the ruling class of the United States, and apparently of the Western world in general, is not fit to rule, by which I mean, one, it does not fight. In fact, the ruling elites seem to despise the profession of arms, the police, the military, and such. Two, their fortunes come less and less from the production of tangible goods and more from things like financial manipulation, influence peddling, rent-seeking, from political means rather than commercial means. And when they are involved in the production of really necessary goods and services, it tends to be in fields in which there is a disconnect between the production of tangible goods that seems to be several times removed. It might be, for example, software, something which is vitally necessary to our civilization, but it's kind of up here mostly. It's don't call me an anti-intellectual for this, but it's saying it's too much in your head and not much here in the hands. It's not as much in the primary factors of the production of wealth, which are growing stuff, making stuff, and moving stuff around. And the knowledge they peddle is crap. Sorry, there's no other word for it. Anything that ends in blank studies, anything like that. And now, an increasing number of people are being turned out of our universities who have degrees in crap studies. And again, excuse me, but there's no other word for it. I just saw somebody commented on, oh well, our electorate is dominated by low information voters, and I was going, no, it's not. It is not low information voters, and no, they are. I said, and of course, the right wing is against education. And said, no, they are not against education. And said, education is increasingly not found in our schools. Certainly not at the highest levels, unless, again, you're into something tangible, which involves, medicine, law, engineering, anything like that. But sorry, if you had a degree in, feminist dance therapy or gender studies, you are SOL, folks. They are not going to open a feminist dance therapy clinic down the corner, and there is not going to be a gender studies factory opening up that'll give you an executive position. And they do not love their country or their civilization, and in fact, they seem to loathe it. See my video on, yes, they really do hate America. And the other point I made here, it's important to understand that by ruling class, I do not mean the 1%, or the rich that we've heard so much about. Certainly them, but there has been what Peter Turchin calls an overproduction of elites. And by that I mean precisely those people who have graduated from college and they seem to have the assumption that they were promised a position in a ruling elite for the price of getting a college degree and holding all of the correct opinions within a very, very narrow range of permissible disagreement. Now, what do they want to do? Of course, the fact is it's not happening for them. These things are not getting the degrees and holding all the correct influence is certainly not resulting in affluence for them, or at least not the kind of affluence they like. I know there's a number of them, of course, who have perfectly adequate incomes, but more and more they tend to have crippling debt loads. And what else do they want? They want to rule. They want to tell other people what to do. They want to rule. They want to feel superior to other people. Now, a characteristic of this kind of person, of course, is their assumption of their moral superiority to the rest of us. And again, while checking this theory against the real world, do we not all have friends who can be perfectly nice people? In fact, nice people, even very good people, but whose calm assumption of their moral superiority is grating. I don't have a blackboard here, but and they want to have privilege. Now, privilege, that gets thrown around a lot. I got accused of white privilege a while back. Now, privilege comes from the Latin privilege, private law. I mean, one law, one standard of behavior for us and another for you. To be able to do things other people are not allowed to do, and to be held to a different standard than other people are held to. In its pathological state, it means also to be able to break taboos and such. And I have been wondering a bit, now that the Jeffrey Epstein scandal seems to have died with him, I wonder about this, and his client list may never be understood, but it's why. How can there be that many pedophiles? How many of this? This was it was a horrible thing, but it didn't seem like it was all that common. Now I have friends who specialize in child protection, investigators and stuff, who said no, it's sort of always been around, but I don't actually know about that. But I think some of this is, if it's not just pure kink, it has to do with a desire for power over others. And, of course, who are the most helpless members of our society? Our children. The desire for power and the desire to be able to break rules that apply to other people. The desire to break taboos. The desire to be another superior kind of person who gets to do this kind of thing. Which results in double standards. And I've got to tell you that if I am correct about this, these double standards are not hypocrisy. When they accuse people of the kinds of things that they are guilty of and stuff, it's not hypocrisy. It is a genuine indignation at being held to the same standard as those they feel superior to. So here we get to the elephant in the room. As I promised you, the elephant in the room is that the ruling class is overwhelmingly left. No, the ruling class is old conservative white guys. No, I remember when that was true. That was true within my lifetime. But, again, this process of change, what Rudy Deutsch called the march through the institutions, I think, back in 1967, Dutschke, D-U-T-S-C-H-K-E, a German intellectual. Before they began the long march through the institutions. And that march, by the way, was enabled by that same class of old white conservative guys who saw that, were wise enough to see that social stability required opening the class up to the non-white, the non-old, the non-male, and even the non-conservative, even to tolerate a diversity of opinions. They thought that this would result in greater stability. They were tragically wrong, and it took a leap of imagination to see how they were wrong. Again, the overproduction of the elites. Why did the ruling class become almost overwhelmingly left? And I invite you, when you're still trying to wrap your head around this, to consider academia at the highest levels and even the middle to lower levels is overwhelmingly left. The entertainment media is overwhelmingly leftist. The news media is, with some exceptions, is overwhelmingly left. And you'll find this even in small-town newspapers, folks. I got to tell you, the producers of news and such are lean very, very heavily left. The intelligence community, the head of the CIA, is evidently in his youth was a communist. There was a time when that would have been a career killer everywhere. The leadership of the FBI, the only place the only place in the higher echelons of our society that are not left, again, is the profession of arms. And our ruling class in this country has never been a military caste. We can thank George Washington for that, but and the Founding Fathers made sure that we do not have a military elite running things. We have elites who serve in the military when they're called on to. You even have, excuse me, something like they had in England back in the days when you bought commissions and such, is they deliberately designed their ruling elite so that while officers would be aristocrats, that after the Restoration, following the Cromwell interregnum, they would no longer allow the military to rule. They would have elites would serve in the military. In America, we made sure that we established more tradition than law, at least as much tradition and law, that officers, even officers from the elite classes, the wealthy classes, while they were in the military, would not interfere in politics. Again, we have George Washington to help explain that. What does this help explain? Among other things, the proliferation of little tyrants on our campuses, who make a seemingly endless series of demands, absurd demands. As said, because this overproduction of elites result in a lot of people who feel they have a right to rule and are looking for ways to rule. thing. There are 72 genders, and remember that two of the ways people exercise or show their power over you, and any citizen of the former Soviet Empire could tell you this, is one is to make you pay lip service to ideas of breathtaking absurdity, and two, to make you do things which disgust you and repel you. Think about that. Do we see a lot of that running around? So, and what else does it help explain? The return of socialism as a viable ideology. We thought this was dead with the catastrophic failure of socialism everywhere around the world. No socialist country in the strong sense. I am aware that a great many people who should properly call themselves social democrats, they call socialism something, they cite the Scandinavian countries, that they are basically they're capitalist economies through and through, but heavily taxed to support a very large social structure like that. It does hinder production. It results in less productive and somewhat poorer countries, but if that's what you want, that's tolerable. When I'm referring socialism, the idea of government ownership of the means of production, with nearly everybody a government employee, basically the government, the more modern version of, I think, who was it, the English writer Ken Follett called it, the government should own the commanding heights of the economy. That it should be a larger government. Why a larger government and a more intrusive government? Again, overproduction of elites. We have too many people wanting to rule, and in a reasonably free society, there just isn't enough rule to go around. So, the return of this kind of totalitarian socialism there, and totalitarianism, as defined by the man who coined the term, Benito Mussolini, means everything within the state, nothing outside the state, nothing against the state. He thought that was a good idea. Some of us don't. So, and what else does it explain? Rage. The rage of would-be aristocrats that have found their status has not resulted in affluence, and not enough rule for them. Not enough rule for them. So, what are they going to do? They are going to continue to push for more absurdities. They're going to continue to push for a larger, more intrusive government, and so that can employ them all. That, I think, is where I should wrap up. I've given you enough to think about, and as I said, please treat this theory as a baby. If it is in fact valid, and I believe it does help explain quite a few things, then it is not just my property, and others can contribute to it as well. And if you think you have something to contribute, hop on board. Again, what's going to happen? I don't know. But as I said, I think this goes a long way towards explaining the absurd improbability of electing a president who had never held political office or a military commission before, and how he defeated a seasoned politician with time in the White House, time in the Senate, time in the State Department, an overwhelmingly favorable media, and the endorsement of a sitting president, and a war chest, a campaign chest, which may have been as much as 5 times greater. That's the first thing I noticed right after the election, and why I entitled one of my earlier pieces, "What the Heck Just Happened?" So, if you think that this helps explain what the heck just happened and has been happening, well, thank you very much, and I think I will leave you right there. Good night.